I'd like to turn with you to Mark's Gospel again, chapter 5, and it's a chapter that deals almost uniquely with healing. And it's a very interesting chapter. And one of the things I'd like to say at the onset is that most of the ministry of Jesus took place around the Sea of Galilee, and he was forever going from one side to the other. I think it's about 6 miles, the greatest breadth, and about 12 and a half from top to bottom, and it's quite deep, about 670 feet, something like that. And I've been on the Sea of Galilee, and it's quite an awesome little sea. Well, they came over unto the other side of the sea into the country of the Gadarenes. And the Gadarenes basically occupied the Middle East of the coast of the Sea of Galilee. So if you get the idea, the Sea of Galilee is something like that, and here is the Mediterranean Sea over here, and the Gadarenes are here, and they had what we might call a coastal area to that Sea of Galilee, and Jesus is coming. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Now, many verses are devoted to this, and in actuality, it presents an interesting theological problem, because here we have someone who came out of the tombs, came out of the cemetery, a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains. In other words, he had a tremendous presence of evil with him that controlled him. And he'd often be bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, the fetters broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him. And in times past, I've been in situations where literally, in order to minister to someone, this happened to be a man, of course, we had to have 4 men, one holding down one arm, another, one a leg, another a leg, in order to pray. These demons are very, very strong. There's a multitude of them, and they're all different, but these were very, very powerful. And always night and day he was in the mountains, in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. And it's a very pitiful situation. And almost you would think, well, there's no hope for this man. And then the other problem is, how did he become like that? How did he become like that? We're not told. We're not told. And when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not." Now, obviously, this is not the man, but this is the demons speaking, and the demons are very conscious of the fact that torment waits them at the end of the time, and that they're very conscious that there's an appointed time for their judgment. And as you look into the Word of God, you find that they were saying to Jesus, "Well, don't torment me before the time." But they know the end. Even James says, the demons believe and tremble. They believe and tremble, but they have no hope. And in Europe, we often used to have to minister to people with, demon possession. And the demons would speak to us. And different kind of demons. Some would be religious spirits. Some would be anger. Some would be jealousy and so forth. But they're very real people. Very real people, these demons. Very real people. And Jesus said, "Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit." And then he asked, "What is thy name?" I don't want to give an expose on, casting out demons this morning, but you have to know who you're dealing with. And often, there is the question, well, who are you? Who am I speaking to? And that is very important. Very important indeed. Who are we dealing with when we're speaking to demons? And he answered and said, "My name is Legion, for we are many." We are many. So there he was obviously the head over a number of demons, a multitude of them that possessed this man. And of course they gave him no rest day or night. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. There's something about demons. They want to have a home. They want to have a house. And some of them inhabit trees. Some inhabit houses and areas. And they feel comfortable in their surroundings. And they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave. They don't want to leave. And they just want to stay there. And that was what these demons wanted to do. They wanted to stay in that area of the Gadarenes. They were comfortable there. And of course, Jesus teaching on casting out demons, he says, you can cast one out and then it wanders around and then comes back to its house, finding it all clean, and brings other demons with him. So this situation of demons is a very profound subject, and I'm just touching on it here. Well, and now in the mountains there's a great herd of swine feeding, about 2,000, we're told. And all the devils besought him, saying, "Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them." And they would have felt very comfortable in the swine, an unclean animal. They would have had a home, and they'd have been very content. Very content. Very content. And there is something there that we have to understand. Demons want a home. Demons want a home. Well, Jesus said, "All right, you go." And the unclean spirits went out. They entered into the swine. But you see, the swine weren't accustomed to having a demon inhabit them. and they couldn't control, and a demon controlled them, and they ran violently down a steep place into the sea and were choked in the sea. So that in the end, the demons didn't have the home they wanted. And they that fed the swine fled and told it in the city and in the country. And the others went out to see what it was that was done. And they came to Jesus to see him that was possessed with the devil and had the legion, sitting and clothed in the right mind, and they were afraid. Now this is very interesting indeed. You see, when people are demon-possessed, if the demon comes out, they might be an entirely different person. Entirely different person. On the other hand, are they going to let the demons come out? You see, and in another Bible college, we were in a meeting there, and some pastors were in the president's office praying for a lady. And they got about 60 demons out of her. 60 demons out of her. And they were worn out, and they said, "Can you come in and help?" And as I came to this lady, you see, I said, "And who are you? You know, who is this demon?" Well, she said, "Was the spirit of my grandmother." And that raises another whole issue, which I'm not going into now. And I said, "Well, we want to get her out." And then I started speaking to this spirit, you see. And the spirit, you know, conscious of the power of God in that room, because there were a number of pastors praying. The spirit said, "Well, I want to go out, but she won't let me go." Now, that's a very interesting thing, isn't it? And then, as I was praying, I saw an angel, a fallen angel, walk into the room and came and stood with the woman. And he started speaking, and he said, "May I respectfully say that man was made a little lower than the angel." In other words, he wanted me to know that he was an angel, I was a man. And then I realized what was happening. The angel was there to strengthen the demon that, well, the spirit of the grandmother, and the thought was that it would stay there. And I said to the woman, I want to speak to the woman, so I don't want you to speak to me, you spirit. I don't want the angel to speak to me. I want to speak to the woman. I said, "Are you willing to let go?" The spirit of grandmother, "Oh no, I want it to stay. It makes me feel comfortable." And so I said, "Well, there's nothing I can do." Well, then she goes home with her friends and said, "I could be delivered tonight if I'd been willing to let the spirit of my grandmother leave me." And of course, I don't know what happened, but obviously she would be in a very serious condition because she was headed for hell in that condition. Well, here, however, you see, this man is sitting and clothed in his right mind. So you have two situations. You have someone who's completely demon-possessed, crying and cutting himself, possessed. Jesus comes, delivers him, and what happens? Well, the person is sitting in his right mind. And he told them what had happened, and they began to pray him to depart out of their coast. They were afraid of Jesus. And then Jesus comes, down the coast, and is going to get into the ship and cross over again. And he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. And Jesus said, no, go home to thy friends and tell them how the great things the Lord hath done for thee and hath had compassion on thee. Now, here is a point. You see, when delivered, this man became almost an evangelist. He became so different. And it raises quite a deep theological question. You see, how did he become possessed? See, I've had to deal with so many people. And there's been a reason why they have been possessed. But, in praying for them, I find that they have not been willing to let go of those sins. And therefore there has not been a complete deliverance, and the person remains bound. I remember we were in the back office, Sister Suzette and her sister and a lady who used to come to the church. And she was, possessed. There's no question about that. In fact, we talked to the spirits, and, as much as Amy and Suzette could do to hold her, I was speaking to her. But the Spirit spoke to me and said, I've got her, and I'm not letting go of her. And I said, well, why? And the Spirit said, because she wants me. Well, she died, and she's now in hell, of course. Some people, can get deliverance from a spirit and be an entirely different person and live for the Lord, like Mary Magdalene, 7 spirits cast out. She became a true worshipper of Jesus. But there are others who are not willing to let go. And therefore, you see, they're not transformed. And this is a most remarkable thing, that Jesus would cast out all these spirits and he'd end up with a worshipper. Very wonderful. But it doesn't always work out like that. And in one sense, I've been told at times by the Lord, don't pray for so-and-so. But if you pray for so-and-so, yes, the spirit will leave, but the person's heart will not be changed. And other spirits will come in, and the result will be that person will be in a worse condition than before you prayed. So one has to be very careful. One has to know who is who. Who is who? Who is who? And Jesus obviously knew that this man would be a true worshipper, that fundamentally he was good, but he'd been overcome by these spirits. How? We do not know. We're not told. Well, there's a little thought on, deliverance. Not all who are delivered change. Fundamentally, who is that person? You've got to ask, who is that person? Is that person going to be different if he is or she is delivered? Or is that the intrinsic nature of the person? And you have to be careful. And also, timing comes into it. You think, I can walk up and pray for somebody and cast out that spirit. That's, of course, if you can. But no, God has his timing. And I've been into all kinds of situations where the Spirit said, it's not my time to leave. I'm going to leave, but it's not my time yet. And God, in his wisdom, has appointed times, as he has for healing. So, if you're in a situation and somebody close to you is obviously possessed by a spirit, you have to pray and say, Lord, what is the battle strategy? There's one thing I want to say is this: the person has to acknowledge their problem. They have to acknowledge that they are bound by a spirit. And if they won't do that, you can't do anything about it. See? And so, there you are. And sometimes you have to suffer that person for some time before the time of their deliverance comes. But, you see, this is the key. It's our relationship with the Lord. And to say to the Lord, now what is the situation here? Why does that person suddenly flare up and then gets quiet? Flare up and quiet. Or why is that person so stubborn? What is the key? And the Lord says, well, that person has that spirit. That spirit is controlling. But then you have to ask the Lord, well, what is the end of the matter? How do we act? What do I do? And of course, you see, being a pastor, I have a lot of sorrow in marriage and so forth. A lot of sorrow. With people who are in situations in their marriage when the other partner is bound. But this is the key. If you would listen to me carefully, please. This is the key. It's relationship with the Lord. He is supreme. You can't go along and, say, well, I'm going to cast out that spirit. No, you've got to say to the Lord, what is the key? What is the key? And, even with King David, when he had committed these sins with Bathsheba and murdering her husband, that he had to be brought to the point where he acknowledged that sin. And it didn't come immediately. No, you have to work with Jesus. You have to walk with Jesus and say, Lord, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? What is the battle strategy? What is your pleasure? Who is the person? If he's going to get delivered, is he going to be like this man, a true worshipper of the Lord? Or is that his fundamental nature? Is it going to be worse after deliverance? You have to ask the Lord. You see, these things, must not be tackled by the human mind. We have to ask the Lord. Well, now we come to Jesus passing over again by ship unto the other side, and it's probably near to Capernaum, I should think. And one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet and said, "My little daughter, about 12 years of age, lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands upon her, that she may be healed and she shall live." And Jesus is quite content. He goes with him, and much people followed him. And a certain woman, which had an issue of blood for 12 years, had suffered many things of many physicians, and spent all that she had, was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse. And when she heard of Jesus, she came in the press behind him and touched his garment, for she said, "If I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole." And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she was healed of that plague. But you see, Jesus knew immediately someone had touched him by faith, and the virtue that was in him flowed out to this woman. And so he said, "Well, who touched my clothes?" Because the disciples, looking at it from a purely natural point of view, said, "Well, look, there's a whole press. Why are you saying that?" But then he looked around to see her that had done this thing. And the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done to her, came and fell down before him. And he said, "Daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace." As you look into the Word of God and as you see the various healings that were manifested in the life of Jesus, there wasn't, shall I say, an order. Some, touched him by faith. Some were prayed for by him. And again, you see, it's his personal relationship with Jesus. "Jesus, please, here I am sick. What is the situation? What is the situation?" You see, you can't order the Lord. In fact, he says in Isaiah, "Are you commanding me? Are you telling me what to do? Are you telling me what to do?" No, rather, our relationship should be one of a friend, and we say, "Lord, you know the situation. You know how sick I am. What are you going to do about it? What is your plan?" And you can't presume. And he might say, "Well, I have an appointed time." Well, there's nothing much you can do about that, is there? You see, he is the healer. And what I'm encouraging you to do, you see, is have a relationship with Jesus. That if it is healing, you may know how that healing is going to take place. Now this woman, obviously faith mounted within her. She said, "If I can but touch him, I'll be healed." But many others were touching him and weren't healed. And then he's on the road, you see, to this ruler's house. And while he was speaking, they came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, certain which said, Thy daughter is dead, why troublest thou the master any further? And they had made their decision. The daughter was dead, that was it. Close the book on that, or the chapter on that. But Jesus said, no. He said to the ruler of the synagogue, I don't want you to be afraid, only believe. And I think, there's a difference between the genders. Your heart would go out to a little girl, and, that would be very near to the ruler. And I think you feel that there's a lot of fear attached to the feminine gender. And yet he's speaking to the Father at the moment. But he then comes to the house. He suffered no man to follow him save Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And comes to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and seeth the tumult. And they had professional mourners in those days who were paid just to mourn and make a terrible sound, wailing. And he said to them, why make ye this ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. But you see, Jesus knew what he was saying, because, we've had experiences where people have seemingly died, but in actuality they've come out of their bodies and they're waiting there, to come back in. It's not their time to go. We've had experiences like that. And so he put everybody out except the 3 disciples and the father and mother. And there he went into the bedroom where the damsel was lying. He took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway the damsel rose and walked. You see, there are differences. And I want to encourage you, is to have this relationship with the Lord. So that, when you have a need, whether it be healing or something else, you say to the Lord, well, how are you going to handle it? You cannot presume, but you have to say to the Lord, what is your plan in this situation? And the plan in this situation was simply that, the damsel had left her body, but she was waiting there for the Lord to come. And he said, get up. She came back into her body and rose. Of course, I've had that experience too. So, this chapter, what are we getting out of it? What I'm trying to impart unto you is relationship. That whatever your situation is, go to the Lord and say, how do you want to handle this situation? We are talking about healing at the moment, and you can see that in these 3 cases they were all different. One was commanding the demons to come out. The other, this issue of blood, had nothing to do with demons at all. It was just a physical problem. And the key was a touch of faith. The damsel, it's quite different. She came out of her body, and the Lord came and said, no, you're going back in. And there she was. She got up and walked. So the situations are different. It's not like you can't have a textbook, well, when you're in a situation like this, do this and so forth. No, it's one of relationship. And we're having some difficulty with a lot of sickness at this moment. Of course, I'm in that situation. But the Lord seems to be saying was an appointed time. And in some situations, I feel much better. My brain is moving again, and it wasn't for a time. And I seem to be able to write now, but I have a shortage of breath. You see, well, I'm saying to the Lord, what are you going to do about it? You see, it's an appointed time. So I have to be content and walk with the Lord in this situation. And you can't look at me and say, oh, well, this is how it's going to be for us. No. You've got to ask the Lord yourself exactly how the Lord wants to move in your situation. And we had a period, the charismatic movement, when they took that prophecy in Isaiah, command ye me. In actuality, there was a little comma that was missed. And actually, the Lord was saying, you're telling me what to do? No, of course we can't. We have to realize He is the Lord of Lords, He is the governor of the whole universe. And when we have situations, we have to ask Him, what do you want to do in this situation?